Well, hello, Confirmands. It is good to see you. I hope you are well. I hope you enjoyed your Friday off, and you're going to be well rested when we get back together. This is Year 2, Life of Christ, Lesson 18. We're talking about parables of judgment and grace. If you haven't watched the sermon for Sunday, the 12th, you should watch that because the themes are connected. And if you have questions from that sermon, and how could you not, you can use those for your questions, for your homework. I do want you to try to do one from these parables, but there's an awful lot to think about, and it's interrelated. So if you come to church on Sunday the 12th, great. Then think through this stuff in light of that sermon. If you aren't going to or are not local and you're not able to come to church, make sure you watch the sermon on the website. It's from Matthew 5, starting at verse 13. It's the sermon for the 6th Sunday after Epiphany, and again, it's the sermon that I wrote for February 12th. All right. The beginning of the phrase that pays this week, it's longer this week, and some of you have been kind of slacking on the phrase that pays. I'm going to buckle down on that. If what you wrote doesn't make any sense, well, then you should go back and see what you missed, okay? So the first phrase in the phrase that pays is this: there is no justification without sanctification. You can figure out how to spell those better than you've been doing, right? There is no justification without sanctification. And then you just throw a comma on the end of that. All right, so we got 3 parables from Jesus today. Remember, parables are stories that make a spiritual point, right? They're not history. They're true, but they're not true history. They're supposed to teach you something. So the first one is called the parable of the workers in the vineyard. We get this from Matthew 20. This is Jesus. You should read along with me. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. And when he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. When he went out again about noon, and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock, he went out and found others standing around. And he said to them, "Why are you standing here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one's hired us." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, "Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first." When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous?" So the last will be first, and the first will be last. All right, here's some stuff you need to know. Vineyards, grapes, when it's harvest time, you got to get them in right now, right? You leave them on the vine, they turn into raisins, right? They're no good as grapes. You can't make wine out of them. You can't sell them at a premium as grapes. So this landowner, this vineyard owner, he's going back and back and back and back to the marketplace trying to hire day laborers. And he goes back and back and back each time. He hires the first guys at 6 a.m., promises to pay them the full daily wage. They're happy as can be. They're going to be able to feed their families. They're going to live with dignity. They go, they work in the vineyard. Every time he hires after that, 9, noon, 3, and 5, he tells people that he'll pay them something that's fair. And they all go and work in the vineyard, right? There's also a rule in Judaism that you pay the laborer at the end of the day. There's none of this 2 weeks of work and then you wait a week to get your check like we do it. That's just not how it is. A guy works all day, he's entitled to his pay so that he can feed his kids. So that's why everybody's lined up. The landowner has the foreman line everybody up in reverse order. People who got there just and worked an hour hour, they're front of the line, and people who've been there all day are at the back of the line. Now, it gets weird really fast because the people at the front of the line who've worked only 1 hour get the full usual daily wage. And everyone behind them thinks, Shazam, we are going to get rich. Yeah, we've been working since 6 a.m., right? So, you know, if 1 hour gets you the usual daily wage, 12 hours ought to get you 2 weeks of pay. But it doesn't work that way. The landowner gives everyone exactly the same, no matter how long they worked. And the people who worked the longest and the hardest are mad. They feel like they've been cheated. But the landowner says, hey, you and I struck a deal that you come and work for me for a day and I give you the daily wage. There's your daily wage. Take it and go. I can be generous with my stuff. That's nothing about you at all. I'm choosing to give these other people more, right? So there's a lot here to think about, of course, right? It's obviously a parable about serving the kingdom of God and receiving a reward for that. And Jesus here is saying that it doesn't really matter how long you work. The reward is the same for everyone. Life in God's house. Eternity in the kingdom of light. Now, because we are stupid and wicked, it seems to some of us that we should then put off going to work for God as long as we possibly can. That we should wait until we're 92 years old and get a diagnosis of cancer before we start thinking about how we're going to serve God. But I don't know if I'm going to make 92. Do you? I mean, in the first couple years after I got out of college, I buried four of my friends. Tomorrow is uncertain. Today might be it. Jesus calls us to work in his vineyard, and he will be generous with us. Now, if you've wasted your time up to now, you can start, and the reward will be yours. But, you know, there's some parts of this that are really, really hard. You know, if the worst person in the world on his deathbed apologizes with a clean heart and asks Jesus if he can go to work for him, he's going to get the same reward that you're going to get making that promise at 12 or 13 or 14 years old. And that strikes us as unfair. But again, God here is generous. And Jesus wants us to focus that God keeps God's promises, that God is generous, and that God wants to give you the full share of the kingdom of light. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about there. The next phrase in today's Phrase That Pays, no forgiveness without renewal of life. No forgiveness without renewal of life. And throw a comma at the end of that, too. All right, another parable from Matthew 21. Jesus says this, what do you think? A man had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, son, go and work in the vineyard today. And he answered, I will not. But later, he changed his mind and went. The father went to the second and said the same, and he answered, I go, sir. But he did not go. Which of the 2 did the will of his father? They said, the first. Jesus said to them, truly I tell you, tax collectors and prostitutes are going into the kingdom of heaven ahead of you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and the prostitutes believed him. And even after you saw it, you did not change your minds and believe him. So Jesus here is talking to people who thought themselves very holy, very religious. They thought that they had it all together, that they were the good ones. And so Jesus tells them this just shattering little parable about 2 sons. And it's impossible not to misunderstand it, right? The father goes to the first son and says, go work in the vineyard, go do your chores. And the kid says, no. But then he feels bad about it and he goes. The other son, the father says, go work in the vineyard. I will go, sir. He's even polite. But he doesn't go. And Jesus says to these people who think themselves so religious, so special, you know, you got prostitutes and tax collectors who said no to God for a long, long time. But then they listened. Then they showed up. Then they started doing what they were supposed to do. You guys specialize in talking about how good you are. You specialize in saying yes to God. You specialize in talking about just how special you are. But you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're in trouble. That's a good parable. Right? Next phrase in today's phrase that pays. No real faith from which the fruits of... Obviously, there's more coming. Don't put a comma there. No real faith from which the fruits of. So what is that? 2, 4, 6, 8 words. If you didn't get 8 words, back this up and look at it again, right? Last parable for the day. It's a shorter lesson today. Not that it isn't rich in things to talk about. Jesus tells a parable of the great banquet. Once more, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his slaves to call those who'd been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. Again, he sent other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who've been invited, look, I've prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they made light of it and went away, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to the slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet.' Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing a wedding robe. And he said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe?' And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" All right, so again, this is a spin on the other two, that the initial guests are the people of Israel, the good people, the holy people, the righteous people, the ones who've been spending their whole life thinking about what God's told them to do, right? That God has prepared a kingdom for them. God has prepared a work for them. God has prepared a path for them. And when it's ready, God calls, and they're too busy to actually do it. It should remind you of the parable we just talked about, right? And the slaves, those are the prophets, those are the teachers, that's Moses, who've come and called these people to come to the celebration of God for which God has prepared, right? But, you know, one's too busy with his farm, one too busy with his business. Some of them just like punching up prophets and teachers, you know, and making themselves feel special by abusing other people. And the king is furious, and he orders them destroyed. I mean, that is a powerful word of judgment, right? And then the king says to his slaves, I got the feast. So we got to get somebody to eat it. Just go out into the streets and gather everybody you can find. Good, bad, high, low, fat, thin, rich, poor. Just drag them in here, right? They don't deserve it at all. They weren't on the original guest list at all, but, you know, I got food prepared. So drag a bunch of people in here. So they go and they do that. When the party's in full swing, the king comes in and he notices that one of these people who's in there, who doesn't have any right to be in there, right, isn't wearing a wedding robe. That you know, presumably all these people were given wedding robes if they didn't have them, right? There's a way to dress and a way to act when you're at a wedding, and this guy is refusing to do it. Fair enough. Tie him up and throw him out. I mean, there's a lot there for us to think about, right? That you and I, we don't have any claim on God. We don't deserve what God gives us. God is bringing us in because he wants people at his feast. He wants people in the kingdom of light. But once you've been brought in, you're actually supposed to live like you belong there. And that is really a challenging thing. That we can refuse to stay in God's party. We can choose to be cast out if we don't do what we're called to do. So we got 3 parables about judgment, we got 3 parables about grace, we got 3 parables about the generosity of God, and 3 parables about how we're supposed to live. Again, I do want you to listen to my sermon for February 12th, and all of this stuff kind of fits together. Let's finish the phrase that pays, though. New obedience do not grow. 5 words. New obedience do not grow. And as is the custom of the last couple of months, this is a phrase that Martin Luther has given us. So, you know, what is that? 5 and 8 is 13. And then 2, 4, 6, 19. 2, 4, 6. So 25 words long by Martin Luther. You need to have all 25 words. They need to be in the right order, and they need to at least be recognizable to me. You can do this right. Think of some good questions. I'm looking forward to talking to you. Our God is a great, graceful, kind God, and is calling you to live a life of service and sacrifice and grace. It's on the bottom of the homework thing, but let me just remind you that we will not be having confirmation on February 22nd. That's Ash Wednesday. You are expected to go to an Ash Wednesday service somewhere in Christendom. For those of you who are local, the parish Ash Wednesday services are at Nelsonville. There's one at 10:30 in the morning. You're probably not coming to that. And there's one at 7 at night. So that is next Wednesday's programming, and I expect that you will be there. So you take care of yourself. God bless. Lots for us to talk about on the 15th. We are having confirmation on the 15th. Talk to you soon. Bye.